Hi guys, I've got a story to tell. So I wanted to get back into reviewing video games and decided to start with some indie titles. I found this game from a solo indie dev that promised an incredibly realistic driving game with a lot of possibilities. It goes on to say that the soft body physics engine simulates every component of a vehicle in real time, resulting in true to life behaviour. With meticulous design, intensive research and experience, the simulation authentically recreates the excitement of crash test driving. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's not what we got. Just a quick note, he has edited the Crash Test Idiot Steam description to something that more honestly reflects the game's features. But that initial description was what intrigued me, and as you'll see, it leads down an odd little rabbit hole of questions. Now, I thought that was it. I figured it was just some kid trying to start out developing games, and went a bit overboard with their Steam description. That was until I checked out the developer's Steam store page. Here I found 54 other titles, all with similar grandiose descriptions and a low price tag of €1 or less. But things get even more interesting when you realise these have all been released since July 2021. That works out at one game being published every 2.5 weeks. As I looked through this catalogue, it became obvious that the video game developer purchased pre-made assets and used them to create numerous permutations of generic games to sell at low prices. Which is the actual definition of asset flipping. An asset flip is a type of shovelware in which a video game developer purchases pre-made assets and uses them to create numerous permutations of generic games to sell at low prices. Okay, fair enough. These very much seem like shovelware, but I wanted to know who was behind this. Why start now? Why do they keep making them? Is it worth it? Why such a short dev time? Why not create educational content to go along with the games? A journey of development kind of thing, which would give more value to the games. And so I got in touch with the developer and set up a little interview. But just one thing to note before we jump into the interview. This guy could talk for America. I've had to cut a fair chunk of the 2 hours of him talking, down to a more manageable snippets. But to be clear, nothing is taken out of context. The first question, why did you get into game development?
Or I guess we'll start back in time more for if that's okay with you, right?
Yeah, let's go for exactly where you jumped into game development.
Where the spawn of this is, right?
Yeah,
so basically, to the mid '80s, I was a teenager, and we didn't. After school, we had nothing to do, so we'd hang out at the local library. I was in Florida at the time, nice. And so we hang out at the local library. This guy walks in, and there's like a table on the side, and he sticks a box on the table, and it's got a TRS-80 computer sitting in it. What's this? And he's like, and I learned later that he ends up being the director of the library, not just anybody. So he's like, hey, if you can build it and get it up and running for us, that'd be really helpful. Because he was old fuddy-duddy, so he had no idea, right? I get hooked up, and I just sat down and I would visit the library again and again, and I just kept teaching myself basic programming.
Nice.
Right? And then after like a month-ish, he comes up again. He's like, hey, we're thinking about. We want to offer this, computer course at the library. We want you to run the class because if some old fuddy, and also he was admitting he didn't know anything. So he's like, if you run it, you're of their age, the hip now, got the 411, the down low, he was trying to use all these hip terms, And so I eventually ended up teaching a class and so eventually it did get published, as I saw that little article I sent you. There's a couple of those, right?
Yeah.
I got published in an international magazine. Internationally, back then in the mid-'80s, you got to remember that this was way before the internet, right? So that kind of got you hooked. So that little particular one, like I said, I made a couple of them. I only sent you one, but there's a couple that I got published back then. This sort of really simple flight simulator, another one that dealt with like 3D letters. But back then, computer graphics would blink when they put it on the screen. It was a sort of blink. It looked like an old-timey Charlie Chaplin kind of, old-timey movie. And it was a real problem for the computer industry as they were trying to block, even though it spread over to the Commodore, to the Amiga, to the TRS-80, and it was a real problem. So I'm sitting there and I'm writing my little code, and I had the same problem in that particular article I sent you. But it's a funny little thing happening there. It's called dual buffering. So I was actually the guy who created dual buffering. And back then, we didn't charge money. Like I said, I would just send this out to like anybody who would take it. I wasn't trying to make money off of it. So I got it published, and then this tape, it was a tape they would put on.
Okay, so I just wanted to jump in here with a quick little note. Double buffering was not created by one person. Everything I could find basically pointed towards multiple people around the 70s and 80s having the same issue with flickering, and they all came up with pretty much the same solution on multiple systems. An example of double buffering before 1985, which is when he wrote that article, and he says that he came up with it, would be the Apple Macintosh, which was released in 84, and it utilized double buffering. There was also the Atari 2600, which was released in 77, and that used double buffering techniques as well. So long before he ever wrote this article, double buffering existed. He did not create it. So it's a weird one to say, especially considering it's so easy to search up. But yeah, let's go forward and see what else he has to say.
I only used the TRS-80 for a little while longer, and then I eventually went to college and learned computers there. I have a computer science degree, yada, 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 and I'm working in the computer industry, da, 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 da. But the Xbox Prime, the first one, I was one of the first 8 people to buy one, right? So I got in this little funny list, because when it first came out, they published this list out there that said, the first 10 people to buy the Xbox, and I was like number 8, right? So this little brush with like greatness, because same thing, I had little like people contacting me and writing me like and then eventually when Xbox Live came around, same thing, I was like the second or third guy on Xbox Live.
Okay, let me just jump in there. I couldn't find any list of the first 10 people to buy an Xbox at the 2001 Toys R Us launch event. There was 1,000 units sold that day, and all I could find was that a man named Edward Glucksman was the first to get one, which was given to him by Bill Gates during the launch event. Now, there might have been a promotion for the first 10, but I couldn't find it. And I don't really see why anyone would be sending letters to any of the 1,000 people who got one that day. On top of that, he mentions being the second or third guy who was signed up to Xbox Live. Don't really know why that matters. I guess he's just trying to let us know that he's an early adopter of these technologies and trying to give us everything that he can to kind of prove that, I guess.
At that point, they didn't have a way to publish games on the Xbox for us boring, regular people like me, right? On the Xbox 360, they did finally come up with like a Steam-like thing called the Creators Club. Okay. And it was this little group. At first, I think it was like 10 of us. And I was like, same thing. I was like number 3 or 4 in the group. So this little group of guys, and we had no backing from Microsoft at all. They just said, hey, it's going to be coming out in about 6 months. How many games can you make in 6 months? Right, and that was the question, and no money. They weren't paying us anything. They're like, look, if you make the games, we'll put them on the Xbox 360, and people might play them, and you could charge like $1.
Again, more claims of mediocre fame. I don't get it. Basically, he joined the Creators Club, otherwise known as XNA Game Studio, which was open to anyone. They could create Windows games for free with the XNA framework, but to run their games on the 360, they'd have to pay an annual fee of $99. But the way he tells the story is as if him and a handful of other indie developers were chosen to create games for the Xbox.
We put on the 360, I got a couple games published on there, some that really took off. There was one called Blueprint Racer, da-da-da. And way later in the future, I tried to publish something called Thief of Seas, which is, of course, a direct parody of Sea of Thieves, and it lasted about like 3 weeks, and that game in that 3 weeks sold more than anything I'd ever done in my life. That I can actually make money doing this. And of course, after a little while, they caught wind, and they're like, no. And since they controlled the platform, they just pulled it. They just delisted, I guess they call it, delisted. And then they also eventually, not right then and there, they eventually kicked me even out of the club. Which is funny, here in the future, I have actually still worked with Microsoft doing other things, but it was so funny. I was one of the founding members, and they end up kind of it's sort of like Steve Jobs leaving, Apple in a way. I was like, I helped build this little club, and you're kind of kicking me out of it. And they're like, well, you shouldn't have poked fun at us, kind of. So now I'm like, okay, I'm going to go publish on PC again. So I went to itch.io. But you don't make money on itch, or I haven't seen anybody make money on itch, right? I was getting little trickle, I'd publish a dozen games, and I'd get like 4 units sold or something. He's like, yeah, there's a place that publishes games on the PC. You might maybe make a couple dollars. So I started working on that, and that sort of led into where we're at.
Okay, so that was a long introduction. To be honest, I could have cut that down more, but I wanted to keep the cuts to a minimum so you can get a genuine feel for his character and motivations. Next question I asked, what are some of the influences for your games? Do you just try to copy popular titles, or are you just learning?
Yeah, I'll see something else like a popular game, and I'm like, can I do that? So yeah, you're kind of getting into it. As you can see over the course, and a lot of people looking backward now. They've got so many of them. You can see that now. You can see the progression, right? You can see me learning things. Yeah, first, but more recently, my more recent challenges are more like time based. As you play it, like, so I do this thing like, can I make it in like 1 or 2 sprint cycles? You know, like, can I make a
Well, I
game?
mean, I don't know if you worked this out yourself, but you've released 52 games on Steam over the course of 134 weeks, which comes out at one game every 2.5 weeks.
Just about a sprint cycle. What's interesting, keep in mind, I work on more than one game at the same time. So it's not like I work on one and then work on another one and work on another one. So I'm not working on Mario and then Mario 2 and then Mario 3. I'm literally working on the trilogy all at the same time. Also, I have a day job. So I got this day job, and I got 2 school-age kids, right? And like I said, I'm just a solo indie hobby guy. I don't even consider myself even really an indie. I like the word hobbyist, because indie, like I said, indicates like more of a small company, and they're usually more dedicated. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it's pretty dedicated now, to be fair. Every 2.5 weeks, you're banging out a title, regardless of like it being, tangentially like similar to some of the other titles it's released. And I noticed you'll implement like the lock-on brawling mechanic. That was in the one Evan, I think it was.
Evan, right? Yeah, I did use that a couple other games, right? Once I've got something that works, I tend to use it again because I don't want to break it. That one I did get a better at, because the problem was, and you notice like in the older games, I wasn't real habit of putting in menus, which is a real problem. I didn't like menus. My thing is, and this is funny, I played a game called Razor's Edge. You're probably familiar with that, right? It's a parkour game. Right, yeah, and the game was known for this lack of UI. There was no UI in that game. And you can still see this now, and I know you probably tipped into this. I found this template for multiplayer that was working for me, so I just kind of use it again and again and again, because it's working, right? And you'll see that, like, it sort of really showed its head. There's 2 particular games. There's multiplayer cowboys and multiplayer cavemen, and at this point I'm basically making memes of myself, right,
by having a multiplayer version of your games.
I took one game and kind of made it into another. I've done that once or twice before.
And Steam has no issue with this, do they not?
No, it was interesting. They do, and it's funny. I get that question a lot, and they do have a quality control, right? And it is a rigorous process. A lot of people are like, Steam will publish anything. I'm like, first of all, I've seen other people that have, like, I don't know if I've seen too many one singular people like me that have the sheer number of games that I have, but I've seen 1 or 2, and I'm not going to pick on any one particular place, but somebody compare me to this one other guy, and he does these more, what do they call them? Not vape, trashware. There's some word for it.
Acid flips.
Shovelware. And it's funny. I was just about to tap into that, so that's good. That's a good lead-in. So the acid flip, and I get it all the time. I'm like,
how would you differentiate your games from acid flip games? Like,
so I'm going to use this word. Kit bashing.
Oh, kit bashing. Okay. You did mention that before.
Okay. Yeah. So, and it's actually become the title of one of my games, right? So I did get that a lot, and to me, I take it very personally when someone calls me an asset flipper, and you will see there's 1 or 2. I'll admit there's 1 or 2 games that, from whatever the asset was to whatever the finished product was, there may not have been a ton of changes. Keeping in mind, I don't make music, I don't make graphics, and I don't even technically program, right? So to get from a kit, an asset to a final thing, there's only so much I can do to change that, right? But to me, kit bashing is, this is my favorite analogy, so work with you a little here. But so you go to a Lego store and you buy an Iron Man Lego set, and you buy a Batman Lego set. So you got DC and Marvel, 2 completely different universes. But you, the kid, you go home and you mash those together because you want Iron Man and Batman to fight each other. So you got this sort of half Batcave, half Iron Man, play set going. And so even though I didn't make Legos, I didn't make either one of those sets, that finalized product of the Iron Man versus Batman mashup set, that's my unique, me alone, I created that. See what I'm saying? So it is unique. It's not a true asset flip, because if I just asset flip, I would have just taken the Iron Man one and called it Archer's Iron Man, or the Batman one and called it Archer's Batman. I didn't really do that. I took the two and kind of mashed them together. Once again, I'm not claiming that I made Legos, right? I don't build it, but it's just a good analogy that I sort of show people. And I think most people, once I explain it that way, they're like, okay, I can see that.
Okay, I have to jump in again. It's not a great analogy because, to be clear, kit bashing refers more to the models used in the game and not the underlying gameplay systems. So, an example, it would be fair to say a developer kit bashes when they piece together assets from multiple sources to complete a project. But if they do that repeatedly, using the same models and gameplay systems over and over with minimal variation, we again are back at the definition of asset flipping. Also, I just want to mention one thing before jumping into the next section. I came to this interview with a fair and non-confrontational perspective. I wanted to give him a chance to show me his perspective. So if you're wondering why I'm not being more offensive towards him and trying to question him on these things, it's because I kind of just wanted to hear what he had to say, give him a chance. And some of the things, like even this, the difference between kit bashing versus asset flipping, I didn't really understand 100% the difference between that, but the more that I researched it, the more obvious it became. He was just playing word games.
It comes up and attacks you.
With the amount of games that you have developed and with them coming out so often, you mentioned there that you have some plans as to how you're going to move forward, and you have multiple games kind of coming out, multiple planned to come out over the next while. Is it? I don't know what way really to word this question. I'm going to go at it quite bluntly. I feel.
Sure, fine.
Is it worth it in that way? Would there not be more value to take more time with them, to develop them a little bit further? Or are you actually finding enough success on the marketplace from kind of just putting them up as you're learning and as you're going and having this 2.5 week cycle?
Yeah, and it's funny. I mentioned it earlier real quick, but I didn't dig into it. It's funny. I don't really do them in serial. I do them in parallel. Mm-hmm. They just happen to get... Their Steam has a way that they publish, which I don't really agree with, but it's a real pain in the neck, really. So let's say I finally get to a game where I'm considered it finished. To me, finished, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It doesn't crash, right? That's a tease to me. You can play it, and I play test my own, and sometimes I'll get my kids or my wife will come in and they'll play. So I'll come up with the idea, I'll develop it, that's one sprint cycle. I'll actually produce it, that's another sprint cycle, and then I'll publish it, and that's another. So end to end, it's really about 6 weeks for a small, simple kind of game. So it's funny, it does appear like I'm doing one, but I'm really producing. So there are a couple in there that I've actually spent serious time, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months making that game. They just don't stand out. And so to me, to kind of circle back to what you're saying, so I've got the ones that I put in these huge time sinks of money, time, effort to produce a game. And then sometimes that game won't sell at all, right? Man, I put 8 months in this game. This thing's gonna sell, right? People are gonna go buy this because they'll be able to see the quality difference of this.
Is there actually one that you feel that really hits that note?
There's a couple. The Clock Knockers was one of the. Well, actually, what's funny is the very first one, because I was just learning Unreal and I just got onto Steam, and I was coming from Unity. So the very first one was free, and that one was you could tell I was going all over the place with that game. I was trying to make Grand Theft Auto, I think, and then this other game I really wanted to push it to the limit, and I made this game called Equal People, and it's funny because the joke is that it's AIs. The people in the game are artificially intelligent. Yeah. It's one of the first games to actually truly use now. It wasn't ChatGPT.
What do you mean that AI. I noticed that they had AI voices, but how else are they?
Yeah. Well, they're produced. They're out. The first of all, part of the story, I actually use an AI to help me generate, and you're going to see this again in the near future.
They very much sounded like they were text generated by an AI.
Some of the text and some of the thoughts, some of
you threw one conversation in, and it was "Hi, I am having a bad day. Yes, me too. Bye."
Yeah. And that's the early days of AI. Nowadays, they are definitely more convincing. And you and I are both in the industry, so I can always kind of spot them because they have this sort of, when AI doesn't know what else to say, it'll come up with this kind of scripted 1 or 2 or 3 answers that if it doesn't know what else to say. So I've learned to detect them because they have the same kind of answer.
There's a feel to them often, yeah.
Oh yeah, and then I'm working. I know there's a really popular ones like ChatGPT and this and that. The one I'm working with is a quieter one. It's called Grok. You might not be familiar with them, but it's an AI that's actually. Yeah, it's produced by X, by Twitter, and it was actually spawned by Elon of all people, right? And you can tell. So they invited me. The team that created him is called X.AI. They invited me to help beta develop that critter. Croc, but he's a kid compared to the other AIs out there. So you got ChatGPT. What are we on, like version 7 now? I don't want to get too much on a tangent on you, but I was doing stuff like, okay, Grok, for the next like 2 minutes, I'm going to be lying, and he's like, okay, and I'm like, okay, I am lying. And it blew his mind,
paradox,
right? He's like, I don't even know what to do with that. Yeah, and it just like fell apart after that for a little while. I think they had to like go back and reprogram it or something. Like, you managed to kill our little AI in like a day, and I was like, yeah, I was trying to. I wanted to see, and I get that too. Like, and the gaming industry in general is full of a lot of negative folks and a lot of trolls, and that's why when something like this comes up, I get a little nervous because I don't know that the person contacting me could be trolling me or whatever, right? And I get it a lot. I do.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Sorry for the tangent. Sorry for the tangent.
No, it gives a lot of background and color to like kind of the overall question, which I think when someone does like, and you're aware of it yourself, like there, that when someone looks at your catalog of games, and once they start to pay any attention to them, they quickly start to go, what is the kind of motivation behind this? And
what is this? What's behind? And there is an IRL ARG that I introduced early on.
Okay, right here he goes on a tangent about an IRL ARG in his games, but it's not finished and he doesn't even know if there's going to be an answer. After a few minutes of this, I rephrase my question.
Would you ever consider maybe to add more value to them, like showing some of the process of it, similar to the way some indie devs kind of, well, especially solo indie, I've noticed do online, where they tend to they show the learning progress.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen people who, first of all, it's funny. And I've gone through this with other people that are trying to team up with, even my own sons, that, they'll come up with an idea, and same thing. I have the one son. He's like, make Grand Theft Auto, and I'm like, you don't
where
just
do you
make
start?
Grand Theft Auto. Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
Where do you start? And I always, and you know this, but I point this out. I feel the need to point it out to people. I'm like, once again, $69 game, Halo. 69-cent game, HALON. Let's say I made a joke game called Halon. So I make a joke. I didn't actually do that, but I've been tempted a couple times.
Well, I did want to ask one thing, right? So, be candid with me on this one, okay? So the description for Crash Test Dummies multiplayer, human or
idiots,
AI?
By the way, it's Crash Test Idiots.
Crash Test Idiots. Yeah, sorry. Human or AI written?
Oh no, it is borrowed. There's some borrowing. What it is, it's funny, that particular one, and you'll see that wording come up a couple times in some other games. But so what I do when I'm like coming up with it, I used to put these really blatant, almost like PowerPoint level descriptions on my games. I like to be really succinct and concise and not ramble like I am now. So like a description for a game to me would be like 5 words or 5 sentences. It'd be like, this is the game, these are the bad guys, you're the good guy, kill the bad guys, you win.
I liked that though. I read through the early ones and I liked it. And then the issue I had with that one, the recent one, was that it's not true.
It borrows. It is true in a way. So what I did is the game is sort of a spoof on another popular game that's out there, right? I won't mention it. Sort of is leaning into BMG. It's leaning into a couple other games that are out there. That is sort of the spawn. That is the concept of where that game sort of came from. Also, like I said, I had actually used those cards before in my past. So I really wanted to use them again.
Did you say BMG? Was it?
Yeah, BeamNG. You know that game, right? BeamNG. No, okay, yeah, it's real. I guess I don't know if it's the US. It's real popular. It's a car crashing simulator game, right? And there's a couple. And then the older days, what it used to be called, Burnout, I think it was called. It was on the Xbox.
I remember Burnout, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, like that. And the cool thing about that game, that's what I wanted to capture. One of these scenes where you're hitting the cars together, and I wanted it to be automatic at first. So like I said, like just as the cars are about to hit, the camera kicks into slow-mo. And just like I said, all the breaking glass and the doors falling off and all that's happening in slow motion. It's just very John Woo, Mission Impossible kind of looking scene. But it was almost impossible to get that to actually work in reality because of, every car, there's like 150 cars in that game.
That's kind of what I was getting at there, was like, right, so it mentions that there's like realistic crash physics and everything. Now, I've seen actual crash tests. You can look at them on YouTube. And I've seen crashes as well. We all know the way cars deform like paper bags.
Crunch up.
Yeah. Now that obviously doesn't happen in the game. So
it's not too. I could probably morphed the wording a little bit. I borrowed a lot of that wording from BeamNG, and then I took it and, like you said, I ran it through like an AI because I couldn't directly copy them.
And they do, like, I was just looking at the trailer there, BeamNG, like the chassis and everything bends, they tend to have
it's true.
Full deformation.
And remember, BMG is made by 300 guys over the course of like 2 years.
I'm not dissing you. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is like, so
that's where we're getting at,
like,
right?
Is that's a fully bespoke system that they've implemented? Have you seen this type of a destruction system being utilized in any other video games? Because what you've shown there in your one it's pretty much what any video it's what GTA would have in theirs essentially.
Similar.
The shell will fall off. You'll get some deformation on the body. Wheels will fall off, and stuff will go on fire. It's kind of extent of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I could change that wording. I have had other people hit me up on that. Because, like I said, I'm just trying to get in on BeamNG's traffic. I'm trying to get in on that market.
Hey, maybe put a little laughy cry emoji in there, because I kind of knew from the trailer that it was wrong and that it was written by AI. But so have you? How much did you delve into it? But
morph it a little bit.
Besides that, how much did you delve into the process of actually trying to have full deformation?
How did I make those? Yeah. And first of all, it's part of a kit, right? So like I said, I'm using kits. And I was like, I just wanted this little physics playground. I wanted almost like a Fall Guys meets driving, like driving Fall Guys, but with realistic graphics, or more realistic graphics. Now, I do it for fun. I do it as a meme, as a joke. I'm not trying to like swoop in and take advantage of anybody. Like I appreciate games like Fall Guys and Human Fall Flat, right? And so I'm trying to, I want to capitalize on their success.
You mentioned that there was some other guys. Do you know of anyone else who has published anywhere close to the amount that you have in a similar period?
Somebody compared me. I haven't looked, because I don't know if there's a way to look that up. I'm sure somebody somewhere's done the research, but I did think of this comparison to this asset flipper type guy, and I won't pick on him, but once again has nothing. I'm not political. I'm just going to mention that he happens to be Russian. That has nothing to do with it.
Do we have a name?
Well, somebody compared me to him, and they showed me his lineup of games. And this guy was a pure flat-on asset flipper. And then on top of that, I think, just by looking at his games, I think it might have been maybe a kid in college who was learning computer science. I looked at it, and I looked through the catalog, and I was trying to well, is it good? What's he doing here? Like, is he, like I said, is it like me? Like he's trying to teach himself stuff, and he's just kind of inviting the world along for the ride? Yeah, but I thought, and I'm just making a judgment, I try not to because I get people judging me all the time, but my judgment was that he felt more like he was an asset flipper, that he was just taking 3 or 4 things, throwing them together, the problem for me was that his barely worked. Like, some of the stuff was just, like, you would play the game and it would crash, or the character would just instantly fall through the map. Like, there was, like, zero, I was like, do you even play your own game? Like there was zero quality control. Whereas mine, I actually do, like I said, my team is mostly me of quality testers, but I'll go back and play it, because I'm trying to make sure that there's a beginning, middle, and an end.
Okay, I just want to jump in here again. I think this arbitrary line he's drawn to try and separate himself from asset flippers is again another weak attempt to justify what he's doing. I will agree though that it's mostly harmless, and Steam tends to stop any particularly egregious copyright infringements before they make it onto the marketplace. So it's mostly okay. But with all that said, it's fairly obvious from this interview that his main goal is to get lucky with a game that somehow goes viral. I've got to say I don't see that happening. It's just that viral games more often than not have some passion behind them. The end goal isn't to get lucky and make a buck from them. Now, I know that's not true for everyone, but churning out low quality, shallow and repetitive games is not the way to make a name for yourself. There's no value beyond your own learning experience, which I think would be fair if your motivation was to learn and not to hopefully profit from as little work as possible. Okay, we're nearly done here now. This was a 2 hour and 15 minutes was how long this was when it started, and I've got it down quite a bit. But yeah, as I said, it took so long because I wanted to really make sure that I left as much of what he said genuinely intact. So I haven't cut it up to make him sound like he said it, and he hasn't. Everything he said, he's 100% said. Every claim it is his. The last question I asked was, what does the future hold and where does he want to go with this? So let's hear his answer.
So I'm trying to really push now. Like I said, I'm kind of getting out of that. I'm doing this as a hobby and as memes, and I'm trying to make myself into kind of what you might call a very small indie dev company, that I'm really trying to create something I think people will look at, and maybe not their instant first knee-jerk reaction is that this is junk or this is janky or this is an asset flip. That maybe their first reaction might be like, hey, he's a small indie dev. He created something that's fun for people to play. He's not taking himself seriously. The games are always published at 99 cents. I put them on sale as often as Steam will let me put them on sale. Remember, that's controlled by Steam and not me. And when I do, I always put them at 30% off, so you can guess that they're 69 cents. So little hidden jokes in there, right? And so I got game. I'm selling them at 69 cents. Steam takes a huge section of that. You know that, right? Steam takes a giant chunk of money. So by the time I get paid, I have to sell like 10 or 20 games before I'll make like $1. So you can imagine how many games I have to sell to make any actual amount of money off of this, right?
Yeah.
I would have to create like a super crazy viral hit like Among Us or Human Fall Flat or one of those. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, is sort of accidentally on purpose create a viral hit. And then I think anybody will tell you that's not something that's easy to do. You can't do it on purpose. You can't make another Mr. Beast out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's and I know we're out of time. I did want to punch you with this. That is maybe a quotable, and you can decide for yourself if it's a good quote. But I've had people ask me this, so I come up with this as that.
Yeah, cool. Finishing thought.
There's content creators, right? So there's streamers like YouTubers and Twitchers and other, but I'll use those two as top two. They're content creators.
Okay, this finishing thought took about 15 minutes for him to get out. He explained how he sees himself as a content creator and that pumping out games regularly is like pumping out content to keep your audience engaged. Now, this is another cop-out and it's a bad analogy. For a few reasons, but two stand out to me immediately. The end goal of game development and video production are fundamentally different. When you develop a game, you want your audience to not only engage directly with the content, but to be a part of it. Versus in video production, you only need them to consume it passively. I think coming at game development with that mindset is just a recipe for failure. Secondly, even video creators who pump out repetitive, low quality, badly researched stock footage are considered a type of asset flipper, except on YouTube they're known as content farms. So if there is a parallel there, it's with the worst form of video content. So finishing up, to be clear, I don't have any hate for him. He mentioned someone created a bunch of hate videos and that he loves the attention, so we're definitely not going to feed into that. I just think he should add more value to the games, either through getting back to teaching or spending more time on them, developing his ideas, themes and gameplay elements. It's obvious he just wants to get lucky and get a viral hit with as little creative thought as possible. This is something he mentioned repeatedly throughout the interview. Again, it's fair, but it kind of gives off lottery ticket addict vibes. Someone who ignores the odds and spends their last few euro on lottery tickets, knowing full well that investing that in anything else would be a better use of the money. Well, that's him with his time. I hope he takes this advice because he's not a bad guy, he's harmless. Just seems like he's addicted to the viral game lottery and has convinced himself that it's worth all that time. I doubt many people are going to see this, but look, don't go giving him any hate or anything like that. And that about wraps things up. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them below. If you like this video and are actually still watching, then you know what to do. And subscribe for more content in about 2 years.